Hi, everyone, and welcome to Clackamas United Church of Christ Facebook page. I am Pastor Adam, and I am here today with the Reverend Timothy Murphy. And Timothy has written this fantastic book called Sustaining Hope. There you can see it. Sustaining Hope in an Unjust World. How to keep going when you want to give up. And Timothy is the senior pastor of Plymouth Congregational Church in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And hi, Timothy. How are you today?
I'm doing right. Doing all right. How about yourself, Adam?
It is good. I was called Eric earlier today too on Facebook.
Because it's Adam Erickson, right?
It's Adam Erickson, and I've been
yeah.
called Eric my whole life. It never happens to my brothers. It is so funny. It's just like a nickname for me. I was introduced to the whole freshman class in high school as Eric, and my friends gave me crap for it. For the rest of high school. So it's just a nickname that's kind of stuck with, but this is not about me. This is about you and your fantastic book, Sustaining Hope in an Unjust World. And just to give you a few accolades, Catherine Keller says, this is an indispensable guidebook for activists who need reactivating. When your hope flags, grab this book and read. That's pretty good.
I was very excited that Dr. Keller was willing to encourage the book. I really like her work and been influenced by it. I think of what I do as taking the insights of Catherine Keller and making and saying them plain. So I have not a poetic bone in my body. So as long as she feels okay that I'm expressing it in a way that still feels authentic and not just butchering the poetry and mysticism elements, I can live with that. So I'm really glad she was supportive.
Awesome. Well, you also have another theologian activist who's got your back. If you need encouragement, perspective, and solid reasons to keep going in the struggle for justice, get Sustaining Hope in an Unjust World. That's from Brian McLaren. So some great accolades on the back of your book. And after reading your book, it's well-deserved. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and why you wrote this book?
Sure. So I'm a minister in the Disciples of Christ and United Church of Christ, and also an activist, been involved in social justice activism for years. And so this book is kind of a coming together of a lot of different experiences in my life. Some of that is some stuff from a little far back, which includes an experience as a cancer survivor, which had a big impact. Not that it changed my perspective, it more kind of accentuated the direction I was already going in, and really trying to often people have this experience of everything happens for a reason, and God's in control, and just have faith, and that really wasn't how I was reacting, and my minister encouraged me along in that, in saying, cancer happens, and the only thing, God didn't give cancer, but what God does is invite us to, what will we do creatively with this awful situation? Can we become a more loving, compassionate person? And so the book itself is not more kind of introspective about cancer and meaning and sense of tragedy. It's connected in that way, but it's more about also this work of social justice for a better world, and the activism that so many people are engaged in, some just recently in the past few years, some for decades. And it's written in mind with persons who often have been doing the work for a while, and what happens after you lose. So I've a lot of colleagues and friends who, have the rhetoric of, conflate the need for victory and the guarantee of a victory, which is great in the moment. I mean, when you're doing the work, you need that motivation, and in that short-term kind of campaign, that's fine. But what happens after you lose, or things are you get an ambiguous result, or half the group you get a half loaf and then everyone disperses, and you're like, that wasn't exactly what we were going for. Where does that fit? And so I really wanted to kind of help process for people, both people who've been in the trenches for a long time and new people who are kind of really mobilized and excited right now to help avoid some of those pitfalls that I see happening from a lot of my friends and colleagues and fellow Christians and others, persons of conscience too.
Yeah, one of my favorite theological statements is shit happens. Right? God has nothing to do with this. The world is just set up. And sometimes my mom had cancer and for 10 years and ended up dying from it. And I came to the same position that you have that, sometimes this cancer happens. And how are you going to respond to it? My mom responded with resilience, and you responded with resilience as well. And how do you respond to, I imagine that is the way you sustain hope is with some resilience.
Well, absolutely, and that happens often by strength from each other too. So, in the United States, we're often very individualistic, and so we might emphasize like will, that we just kind of need
Yes.
to will and to power through. And you can power through for a good length of time, but eventually your energy will flag, and it might happen instantly one day where you just don't have anything else to give. And so resilience happens by being part of communities of support that can help you stay strong when you're not feeling strong, that can help kind of keep a vision of a better world alive when you don't have the energy to give anything for that vision. And so that's kind of one of the takeaways, I think, in the book is kind of communities, whether those are religious communities or other communities of a vision of a better world. I think that's really important and mandatory. And any, I don't know of any movement or work for a better world that's endured that hasn't had some community involvement or some community organization, if it's going to last more than 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
I just can't think of anything like that.
Yeah, no, I can't either. We do have some people in the audience, and welcome everyone. And if you have comments or questions for Timothy, you can put those in the chat section there, and we will try to get you in. You're a Christian, you're a pastor. And one of the big questions that I've been struggling with lately is that it kind of seems like there's a branch of Christianity that's really loud and that's really antithetical to social justice. This brings me to the question, is Christianity antithetical to social justice? I have witnessed and experienced many Christians quoting Bible verses that are all about kind of things that we would think are not good for social justice, things against the LGBTQ community, for example. There are passages that seem to suggest that if you are poor, it's because you haven't worked hard enough and you just need to pull your bootstraps up and work harder.
I don't think it's the bootstraps script, but people use, yes, you're definitely right.
Yes. Yeah. Like I totally disagree with the way that they are interpreting scripture, but there are times when I'm just like, man, the world would just be a better place if there were more atheists and less Christians.
Well, there's certainly forms of atheism that are truer to the way of Jesus than certain declarations of Christianity, and so I'm completely for that. And just this morning on my church's Facebook page, we had just an ad about it's a Pride Month and being an open and affirming LGBTQ affirming place, and someone started to try to get an argument about scriptures and so forth. And it's like this is not the place for that. If you can feel that, fine, but that's not going to be okay here. You need to cut it out. And they went to you're all going to go to hell. And so they got blocked because we can't keep the space safe for LGBTQ people if that kind of hate language is showing up. But certainly, if you took a poll of persons, there have people who've taken poll studies that have asked people when their first reactions, especially younger people, what they think about when they hear the word Christian or Christianity. The words that come up are hypocritical, homophobic, closed-minded, judgmental, conservative. Mm-hmm. So because that is the way that it is so often experienced in so many places, it's probably still in many ways the dominant form, certainly in the media. So I'd say 90% of any time Christianity is mentioned in the media, it involves white evangelicals is always the qualifier. I don't know the last time I saw a major article asking Black or Latinx ministers what their thoughts were about child separation. And so it's part of it's media, but part of it's also this big. There's a lot that needs to be held to account for the damage that many forms of Christianity have done. Now, when I read the Bible, I read it as a book of poor people who are migrants and refugees fleeing from place to place, and saying, where's God in all this, and what are we supposed to do next? And so from that perspective, that's kind of the perspective from which these questions arise, and so that's really helpful in thinking about one's social location and the social location of where these scriptures come from. So for me, the Christianity and other religious traditions, I can speak most authentically from the one I'm a part of, and social justice are very compatible. And so the best way to live out my understanding of the way of Jesus is to work for a more just world where people are valued as they actually are, and not just how they can be used or misused by others. So long as our world and society has systems that exploit people, that denigrate them, that don't value them for who they are, then there's going to be a role for faith communities to respond and say, that's not the way the world needs to be. And until that day, which I imagine there will always be a need for that. If we solved every problem that we could think of on a list, in 200 years, there'll be new problems that need to say, wait a second, people are being misused and mistreated this way, so we need to address it. So I think that's a perpetual thing, which I think of as an opportunity to care for others and to work for a more compassionate and just world. I guess someone could just wish for it to be resolved once and for all, which, is also a thing in scripture too. But I don't see that, I don't see that as a problem in the same per se.
Yeah, it's interesting because people will often say that history is written by the winners, but in fact, the Bible was written by losers of history.
But then the winners of the world decided to interpret it for themselves and make it into their a triumph of their victory.
Yep, there you go. So like the Hebrews were enslaved in Egypt and they got out and they were losers in Egypt, and then the Assyrians came and conquered, and then the Babylonians came and the Persians came and the Romans came, etc. So this is a book that goes against that view. It was written by losers, and you mentioned that Jesus was a loser.
That's right? That's a pretty provocative statement, I suppose.
It's a fairly provocative statement, but because nobody wants to follow a loser, and Jesus keeps saying, "Follow me." So can you tell us a little bit about Jesus as a loser and what you mean by that?
Right. So, I mean, in our world, no one really likes being called a loser. It's more of a taunt, like a schoolyard bully taunt. There's winners and there's losers. And you want to be on the side of the winners, of course, because they're the ones that are obviously blessed and with divine favor. But I think Jesus, if you looked at him in his day, he wasn't successful in any like sort of earthly mission. The people who followed him weren't prominent people. He was killed for sedition by the state. He had a loser's death where people. The whole point is to say, "Oh, I do not want to be part of that. My goodness, this is a shameful, awful thing." But it also means that Jesus is for losers. Not people who like, oh, I'm a loser, but that people who have experienced loss or experienced mistreatment or marginalization, the Gospels are written for that, to say, no, you're valuable and you're loved and your life makes a difference. And so Jesus is a loser in the best possible way. Like he's the loser worth living for, because he shows how we can. If we've been losers in the world, we understand that we're valuable. And if we've been winners as the world sees it, we can go, wait a second, do I deserve this winning? Is this something that, the world's given me as this form of privilege or whatnot? How can I stand in solidarity with those who are on the losing side of history or decisions, political or social or otherwise? And so Jesus, a loser, is awesome.
He flips everything upside down. The first shall be last and the last shall be first. It's just very unconventional wisdom. And even as you were like mentioning the cross, it's, Paul says it's foolishness to some, and what is the rest of it? It's foolish. Like, who wants to go to the cross? Well, this is what Jesus does in order to bring life everlasting to all people,
and
including those who we label as losers. Yeah.
And what Paul also says is that what others have taken for loss, I've taken for gain.
Yes.
So that Jesus stands on the side of the oppressed is a more traditional kind of liberation way to talk about that. But in more colloquial language, Jesus on the side of losers in our world.
Yes, I dig it. And this gets back to the social justice that you are working for within the American system. You tackle even the American dream. So what is it about the American dream that we in the United States hold pretty dearly? How do you see it as a connection to injustice in the world?
So, I mean, the American dream at its best is this idea that one's children will be better off than you were, or that you were better off than your parents were. The way that works is can look differently. The stereotype is everyone will have a house with a white picket fence and so forth. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be able to not be poor and marginal. I mean, so there's nothing wrong with that. But the American dream is really a secular theology of like guaranteed progress, that if we only have faith in it, then things will get better. And so just keep working hard and keep struggling and keep fighting. Even if you're radically exploited, if you're working 2 jobs and not getting ahead and falling further into debt, and you're not ever going to get out of like your student loans and so forth, but just have faith, because America is the land of opportunity. And so just believe. And I think many people are not experiencing that. And so the only thing that, so I think it's better to let go of that illusion. There's no guarantee of from generation to the next. And there are ways that things are improving, but there are also things that are empirically worse than they were 50 years ago. So not just a generation, 2 generations ago. The Voting Rights Act, so voting rights for people of color is empirically weaker than it was 50 years ago. I wrote in the book when I was drafting it that maybe gender rights were better than they were 50 years ago. I mean, they are, but they're maybe worse than they were 2 years ago, just because of some of the reaction. But the health of the planet is definitely worse than it was just a few decades and generations ago. And so the American dream can confuse us of actually what we're experiencing. So, I mean, I want everyone to be better off and to be well, but there's no guarantee. And it's really just a secularized belief in this inevitable progress, upward and upward, manifest destiny forever. And I don't think that's helpful.
Yeah, it's the secular prosperity gospel. If you just work hard enough, then you will have the American dream. And if you don't have the American dream, it's your own fault because you didn't work hard enough.
I wonder if it's tied with certain forms of individualistic capitalism, and I've read that wherever as globalization expands to other countries, wherever capitalism is at its fullest swing, that's also where the prosperity gospel is most popular, because they kind of they go in hand together, and or the individual kind of working and success, and there are some things of the prosperity gospel I don't oppose, like the idea that God wants us to be well and not mistreated and oppressed. I'm all for that. But the issue is the guarantee, God as kind of this person you can just make these demands on because God can do it, and so God will do it, and it's about you individually, and if it's not working, it's something wrong with you. And that is the classic thing, like it's all a test or something, and that's just not how this works. And so, yeah, there's a few, I mean, every thing has a kernel of truth in it. That's why people find it helpful, but it's the implications and the consequences, the brutal consequences when it's not working for you, when you're a loser in that game, that just doesn't work or resonate for me and for many other people.
Yeah, that leads me to another question that you talk about, which is about power. And
Mm-hmm.
how should we? Because often in these political conversations, it's like structured in a way that like, well, we just need to get more power than the other people, and then we'll be the victors, but they will be the losers.
Mm-hmm.
And it just gets in this rivalry for power over and against one another. How should we understand both God's power in the face of injustice and then human power in the face of injustice?
Mm. Well, I don't think power is bad. I mean, power is the ability to act, as any good organizer will tell you. So in like
Mhm.
organizing work, they talk about often disabusing people of the notion that we need to not have any power and just kind of self-abnegation and self-sacrifice. So I don't think that, but everyone has some power or ability to act, but that means that none of us or nothing has all the power. And so I think it often it's unhelpful to think about God in a way as the one having all the power,
Mm.
because then you end up with these theology crises and these faith crises of when bad things happen. Well, where is God, or why is God allowing this to happen? Or and it's just it comes from, if that's where someone's at, then I'm pastorally, it's not helpful to say, but intellectually, it's just faulty assumptions. That's the foundation of that. And so we can, when bad things happen, it doesn't mean that we don't grieve or are in pain or lament, but we're not having like bad theology to like make things worse. You know, I mean, it's like when you're upset, and then if a parent would, you know, yell at you for being upset, and it's like, you know, you're already upset. You don't need some like guilt crap on top of it to like
Yes.
to process as well. I mean, it just adds more problems. There's enough problems without doing theological malpractice. So I'm all humans, yeah, have power, and we have ability to help make the world a better place, but we also are responding to others who have power who don't always have good intentions. And that
Mm.
was something that was hard for me as someone growing up in a liberal household to accept, is that, you mean not everyone has good intentions? That people can know
Yeah.
better and still say, you know what, I'm going to hurt somebody else? So that's that kind of, and I don't know if on the West Coast you deal with that kind of liberal naivete. Why isn't everyone just, they should know better? Why?
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like that people can do harm because they gain and from their perspective, and they don't feel anything when
Right.
someone's hurt, or that person that they're hurting doesn't matter, or their life doesn't matter to them. And so we should use the power we have in solidarity with each other, as you know, the hands and feet of the divine. We're not the only hands and feet. So just because if we don't act, you know, there are other ways that that people in the divine may act, but you know, we are hands and feet, and so why not use them for good and for healing? So it's our power is an opportunity to help, you know, as you know, tikkun olam, as Reformed Jews
Yeah.
are wont to say, of the repair of the world. We can't do it all, but still we're responsible for doing the part we can, and trusting that that others are going to work and can partner with us in that work as well. And so that's really how I think God's power works in the world, as this kind of perpetual, persuasive force encouraging us. And when we do wrong and we ignore, it goes, all right, well, okay, well, I'll give you another opportunity, and I'm giving some other people an opportunity, and maybe we'll do better from the mess we've made. You know, okay, you
Hmm.
crucified Jesus. All right, now what are we going to do? I mean, so it's not a new problem, but it existentially feels new to us because it is new to us. But it's helpful to get to learn historically from like how other people have experienced this and how they've responded, so we can find strength from that. But it's always new to you when it's new to you, and I
Yeah.
don't lament or I don't resent someone for experiencing it that way, because how else could you experience it but
Right.
from your body?
Yep, absolutely. We have some viewers, and if you have comments or questions, you can put those in the chat room, and we'll bring them in for Timothy. You talk about the intersectional nature of injustice, which is an interesting phrase, and I was wondering if you could unpack that a little bit and why that matters.
Sure. Now, and that's not something that is novel to me. I think a lot of people are increasingly familiar with notions of intersectionality. So
Yes.
there's many social justice issues and around, we could call them the ism list in some ways: classism, racism, sexism, homophobia, ageism, abilityism, nationalism, and so forth. Anthropocentrism, even if they go academic, but there's so often issues start, like people start with an issue that's particularly resonant on their hearts, and over time make connections to other things that are happening. But it was Black women, Kimberly Crenshaw, I believe, in the late 80s, who had this notion of intersectionality, that you can't divorce the challenges that you're experiencing from parts of your body. So being Black and being a woman and being queer, like which oppression is happening at a certain moment. And so that we are complex beings, and so oppression and injustice gets layered on each other, as does privilege. And so I am predominantly, I have a lot of privilege, but I have certain experiences that have had me marginalized in certain situations. And so each of us has a confluence of privilege and oppression, and recognizing that, and where we can amplify the voices of others who are most directly impacted by something, centering those stories and learning how we can be healed in the process is really important. And that's actually the most important spiritual practice I think I encourage, is to divest ourselves from unjust privileges, those who have those, and to recognize how we can stand with others who are being marginalized, but who also have some power and action too. So it's also the case that no one is just nothing but a victim who is an object who's acted on. That's the wisdom of post-colonial theory, is that everyone is a subject. And sometimes the agency, the power you have is limited, but you can be creative in those moments with what limits you have. But we all have those limits. So I think that thinking about justice intersectionally helps us also. The Poor People's Campaign talks about it as a fusion movement. So of looking at these different issues and how we can are stronger together. So it's not just like labor people are supporting, environmentalists are supporting feminists, but that we recognize that their issues are connected and can work together for a more just world.
One of the things that I am seeing in people like you and me is kind of a fear of losing power, losing privilege, and thinking, well, if we give it up, then we're not going to have this good place in the world, and other people are going to have it, and then they may come after us for what we've done with them. I've seen this fear. How do we speak to that? Because I think that you're absolutely right. But how do we speak to that fear and kind of alleviate it?
Well, that's really hard. And there's no, I mean, the best argument might not resonate with someone emotionally in the moment. And it depends really one-on-one on what's going on in someone's life, and if there's trust with the person. So someone who doesn't know me at all and here's a valid argument, they're going to go, yeah, well, you don't know me, you don't know what's going on in my life. Why should I trust you, and so forth. So I'm not going to try to convince anyone right now, but the experience is one of losing privileges that are hurting you. Yeah. That are hurting you, that are hurting me, is actually a way to heal ourselves. So it's not about, oh, I should feel guilty, and oh, I have this thing that is really good and I'm going to give it away because I feel sorry for some other person. It's like, no, this is like screwing me up and it's hurting me, so that I'm not able to live life as fully as possible, so that it's in my interest to get rid of those things that alienate me from others, and so forth. And that in some ways is it's a spiritual practice. It's a conversion moment. I mean, you can make the argument all you want, and you could give data and how people's quality of life and blah, blah, but it's not going to convince someone until they're open to having that kind of conversation, and to hear them. What are they afraid of losing, and what would they gain, and would it be worth it? And I think that it would be worth it, but that's a faith stance more than a policy point.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's good and helpful. Thank you. There's often can we talk about the role of religion and politics? A lot of your book is about politics, and I don't know about you, but I often get criticized for being political
Oh,
as
people
a
mean all sorts of
as
things by that. It's always
I
helpful. Like,
know,
what do you mean
right?
by that? What are
Yes,
you talking about?
yes. You shouldn't make political statements. You're going to lose your 501(c) status or whatever. We're going to go after you. So, what do you do with what do you do with the relationship between religion and politics?
Well, I mean, to the extent that both religion and politics are about how do we organize our society, and what are the values that we want to see reflected in society as a whole, they're inherently connected.
Yes.
So it's almost impossible to separate them out in terms of values and priorities. However, I would strongly oppose any one group saying we will now impose on you what I think is best. So even if it was like all my ideas, I'd still be like, wait a
Hmm.
second, we need lots of different voices and perspectives because there
Yeah.
are no benevolent dictatorships that just eventually become a dictatorship. So and theocracies even more so. I
Yeah.
mean, the anyone who says I alone know what's right, I alone can fix it, needs a little more apophatic theology and
Uh-huh.
or philosophy in their life. And so I think that I don't know how to do and live up my tradition without it having social consequences, because as I understand it, the gospel is a thing for the world and for communities. And so if it's particularly about systems that are denying the divine value in others, then the only way to share the gospel is to address those problems.
Yes.
So, but I don't think, I mean, I was a professor of religion and politics at Claremont, a visiting professor for a little bit. So I
Hmm.
have a different perspective maybe than some people. But um, like if we're going to talk about welcoming strangers, how do we? What kind of economic system should we have, and how should it? How should we support those who've been on the losing side of it? Whether and how we should go to war, and how do we engage with other languages, cultures, and peoples? All of that is like prime religious content, and it's prime like political debates, and so forth. So I find them inherently connected, but not in the way that's so often done, which is of theocratic certainty. It's more of a conversation of like, well, what matters to you, what do you value, and how do we hear each other in different perspectives, and how do you wrestle with that? And
I think you handled it beautifully. I mean, if you want to say that religion should stay out of politics, then we need to find a different book, because the Bible is all about religion and politics and our responsibility to one another. And I forget exactly how. See, now my camera's back
oh well,
to being bad.
it was that revelatory moment, and now we're back into the fog of uncertainty again.
Anyway, so yeah, we just need to find a different book if we're going to take religion out of politics. But I mean, the problem that I have is that there are people who have voices that I'm sorry, much more louder than yours or mine, who are doing things that I think are reprehensible in the name
Absolutely.
of
Oh, yes.
religion. And I don't know if that means that you and I have to be louder, or if that means that somehow we have to get them to be quiet. I
I'm staying
don't
busy.
know.
I don't.
Right? Right?
Right.
I mean, this is the perpetual problem. So,
And I would say that something I didn't say is that I think it's really important that religious communities and traditions do not endorse candidates or
yes.
put into any one candidate divine or messianic hopes. So the appropriate thing is to promote issues and policies, particularly when it's hurting people that we're in relationship with.
Yep. I mean, when you're talking about religion and politics, you got to go to the prophets, and the prophets always go to the kings and say, your responsibility is to care for the poor, the widows, the orphan, those who are marginalized.
The traditional language, yeah.
Yeah. The immigrants, the foreigners in your midst. I mean, this is when Jesus preaches the kingdom of God, he's doing it in the Roman Empire. I mean, this is subversive political language. You know, the Son of God is the Roman emperor. And for the early Christians to say, no, Jesus is the Son of God.
Every one of those terms, Lord, Savior, Messiah, they're political terms. But the problem is we took the term and gave them the power and domination language versus hearing them and having Jesus reinterpret that language for us. So we kind of get it backwards. We say, oh, Jesus is like a Lord, and versus like, this is what a Lord should look like.
What we have done, what a lot of people have done, have made Jesus into just the new Caesar, just the new emperor, and as you say, not allow Jesus to define what Son of God is, but we've conflated Jesus and the emperor, which is bad.
That was the classic phrase from Alfred North Whitehead, paraphrased. The church gave unto God the attributes that belonged exclusively to Caesar. You know, domination, control, power, and said, oh yeah, that's just on a big universal scale.
Yep. Boom. That's it. So final question for you. Your book is about hope. And a lot of us are like needing hope in this world that seems so fractured and oppressed and full of hate. How do you find hope? How do you sustain hope in all of this?
Well, keeping the vision alive that another world's possible. Yeah. Now it's and having a community that has your back and shares that vision through thick and thin across generations and across all the garbage that we can experience in our lives and our world. And it's frustrating because that may not feel like enough. Like it may feel like, man, I really want it to be okay and fixed. That's like the book of Revelations, you know, it's like being oppressed and saying, and God's going to come down and kick ass and resolve things once and for all and destroy all of those oppressors for good. Okay, yeah, but that hasn't happened, and it's not going to happen. And even if it did, there'd be new problems. So I call it the Toy Story 3 solution. You know, when Toy Story 3, at the end of the movie, when they can't escape the incinerator and there's no way to get out, and what do? They reach out to each other and they grab each other's hands because they care and love for each other. And so because they love and believe in each other, and it's enough, even if it doesn't solve the problem. So the problem is an unjust world, but the solution is to maintain hope that things can be better. Through all the problems, through no guarantees other than that the divine will be with us, which we'll often experience in our journeys with one another. And that is enough to sustain hope in an unjust world. As frustrating as it is, but it's the best answer I can think of that's also compelling to like the world we live in, and not just saying, don't worry, in 2025, the eschaton will happen in the kingdom of God, because that's happened. You know, how many times people said that, and it's like, no, that might get you through to 2025, and then 2026 go, well, what now? And so just trying to avoid some of those problems from the get-go, that can also be compelling and resonate in our hearts. That resonates for me, and I think it does for a lot of other people, especially when some of the other more predominant answers don't seem to work or don't seem to, you know, they've fallen flat.
Yeah, no, that resonates with me. And Timothy, before we end, I just want to point out that before we started live, that you mentioned that you might nerd out on something, and you did fantastic, especially with that Toy Story 2, Toy Story 3. That was so good. I love how at the end of that they work together for the good of all of them, and they escape hell. I mean, they're going into hell with one another on earth, and they escape it. And I think that's just a beautiful way to end our conversation. So
there can be
thank you.
Miraculous surprises that we couldn't expect.
Yep,
sure.
Absolutely. So Timothy, thank you for this conversation. If people want to keep up with your work, how can they do that?
Well, I do not have a big online presence because I'm more of a in-person action kind of guy. But the easiest thing is the Plymouth Congregational Church's YouTube page has different videos and sermons. So if you're interested in that kind of thought, I was also the executive director of Progressive Christian Uniting for several years, and the Progressive Christian Uniting blog is available online through Weebly, and so those aren't new, but you can get about 3 years worth of blog reflections around things that were happening. And I'm involved in the Disciples of Christ and United Church of Christ. And so if you're familiar with those traditions, you'll see me around at General Assembly and those types of things. Or if you live in Fort Wayne, hit me up and we'll work on some justice action in Mike Pence's state. So,
there you go. Nicely done. I dig it. Thank you, Timothy, for being with us. It was a fascinating conversation. Again, the book is called Sustaining Hope in an Unjust World, How to Keep Going When You Want to Give Up. Oh, there you go. I've got it here too. So yeah, awesome. All right, friends. Thanks for being with us. And until next time, grace and peace be with you. Bye-bye.
Grace and peace.